41 days soon. Donald Trump will be inaugurated at noon. And we should take seriously what he's saying about Canada. It's been nonstop since Justin Trudeau jackassed from Ottawa to Mar-a-Lago because Donald Trump said the word tariff out loud. Since then, Donald Trump has taunted, yes, his peer nonstop. And in doing so, he has insulted Canada. He has started to destabilize the most enduring relationship in world history, which between the two nations finds the longest undefended peacetime boundary in world history. So, of course, America's dumbest president, yes, that would have been our 45th, thinks it's funny that sometime after midnight to start tweeting or whatever it is you do on Truth Social about America, I suppose, invading Canada, because that's the implication. And it's not just dumb, it's not just unfunny, it's immoral and profoundly stupid. This is the warning from Donald Trump on Truth Social shortly after midnight last night. It was a pleasure to have dinner the other night with Governor Justin Trudeau of the great state of Canada. I look forward to seeing the governor again soon so that we may continue our in-depth talks on tariffs and trade, the results of which will be truly spectacular for all. Donald John Trump. There are 41 days to go until Donald Trump will raise his hand and become president of the United States. Again, the 47th president. All over Washington, there is excitement in the air by the MAGA weirdos, by the sycophants, by the posers, by the clowns, by the drunks, by the accused rapists, by the convicted petty criminals, by the convicted sexual assaulters, and everyone else who is part of Trump's toxic menagerie as they get ready to exercise power without restraint with the magic of the Supreme Court granted immunity that makes Donald Trump a king, a Caesar. One of the most providential blessings that the United States has is the fact that 2 hours north on the 49th parallel exists an international boundary that I drove across yesterday. It is the longest peaceful, undefended border in world history. The prime minister of that nation, our ally, is Justin Trudeau. He is not an American governor. He is a Canadian prime minister. He is the Canadian head of government. King Charles is the king, for the record, not Donald Trump. The reality is that all through our history, Canada has been the larger geography, much less populated, but it hasn't stopped the United States from trying to invade it multiple times, always unsuccessfully. In fact, the last time that Americans and British soldiers, Canadians, had weapons pointed at one another was on a small island off the coast of Washington State in 1859. It was called the Pig War. It was a disputed island, the territorial boundary unset. These three islands, Lopez Island, San Juan Island, and Orcas Island, who owned them? Was it the British or was it the Americans? Well, what happened is there was a fence line with an American farmer and a British farmer. And the British farmer had a pig that was rooting on the American farmer's fence line, who warned the British farmer over and over again to do something about the pig. Well, the American farmer one morning shot the pig. The British subjects on the island were outraged and demanded that the American be arrested. And so, from Vancouver was deployed a detachment of Royal Marines to do just that. The Americans on the island would not have it. And so a man landed with a detachment of American Marines under his command that would soon join an infamous role in American history. That man's name was George Pickett. But George Pickett, at that point, last in his class from West Point, took command of the Americans. The British and American forces on the island did everything they conceivably could do to provoke one another to fire the first shot. Before word reached London and Washington, of course, on the eve of the American Civil War, the governments in Whitehall put a stop to it. In the end, the Kaiser, considered to be the wisest statesman of the day, was the only person that both sides, both parties, the British, the Canadians, and the Americans, could agree would be fair in the resolution of the border dispute. And the Kaiser decided those islands, they belong to the United States. And that was the last time there was any dispute whatsoever about what the boundary between our two nations were. On September 11th, 2001, thousands and thousands of Americans were in the air when the towers were hit, and those planes had to land. American airspace was closed. Those planes landed in Gander, Newfoundland. There's a play about it, Come From Away, that tells the story of the tens of thousands of Americans taken into the homes of ordinary Canadians. This isn't funny, what Donald Trump did. When we play a baseball game against a Canadian team, for example, at Yankee Stadium, Americans respectfully stand for the Canadian national anthem because it's a different nation. Our teams play each other in the Olympic Games, and the sons of our nations have fought together, they have served together, and they have died together in the First World War, in the Second World War, in the Korean War, and in the war in Afghanistan. When a young Canadian soldier was killed because America was attacked, his body, when it's laid out in his coffin, in the box where his body will be laid to rest, is not draped with an American flag. It's draped with a Canadian flag. Canadians have pride in their country, and they have a great history, one that they should be proud of, and one that every single American should respect, starting with the President of the United States. Donald Trump has broken many traditions, many norms, many standards. Here is a terrible one. He called Saudi Arabia first when he was elected president in 2016. Precedent is that the President of the United States calls our best friend first, Canada. And he does it by reaching out to the Prime Minister. There are millions of Americans married to Canadians, millions of Canadians married to Americans. We have families that are intertwined on both sides of the border. We have militaries that are operating together in places like Cheyenne Mountain. There are Canadian astronauts that are part of the Artemis program. It's not an American state. It's not something funny to joke about. Right now, in Europe, in the Ukraine, there is a war between two nations, a bigger and more powerful nuclear armed one, and its sovereign neighbor, which has killed 1 million people. In the Middle East, Assad has been overthrown. The world stands at this second in a moment of crisis, in a moment of danger, and what Donald Trump is doing is taunting the Canadian Prime Minister. Now, no doubt, this will be celebrated and laughed about on Fox News, dismissed in other places. But the same people cheering for this stupidity are the same nihilists cheering for the assassin of the healthcare CEO gunned down in a Manhattan street. It's a type of nihilism, insanity, that for no reason whatsoever just wants to burn relationships, burn alliances, burn our history to the ground. For Trump. Because why? It's funny. It's not. It's fucking disgraceful. And it will never not be. This is The Warning. I'm Steve Schmidt. This is The Warning. And I invite you to join, subscribe on our Substack, on our YouTube channel. Follow us. Welcome to the community.